Welcome to Professor Game Podcast, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking, who brings the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration that help us in the process of getting the students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I teach and work at IE Business School in Madrid, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials. Want to know more? Go to professorgame.com/subscribe, start on our email list, and ask me anything. Engagers, today we have somebody absolutely fantastic, and this is Kevin Allen. So Kevin, before we say all the intro, all the good stuff that is coming, we need to know, are you prepared to engage?
I am prepared.
Let's do this. Because Kevin has had a 35-year career in the global ad industry, where he was key to the transformation of the powerhouses McCann Worldgroup, the Interpublic Group, and Lowe Worldwide. Is that the way to pronounce it?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
He's also worked with brands like MasterCard, developing the famous Priceless campaign, which I must say my wife worked for in Latin America when she was working in the ad world.
That's fantastic.
He's also brought $1 billion in revenues and was part of the Majors advisory team that prepared the way for the successful New York City Renaissance. So Kevin is the best-selling author of The Hidden Agenda, Proven Way to Win Business and Create a Following. He later became the founder and chairman, which is probably one of the main reasons we have him here today, of EI Games. They are the creators of award-winning emotional intelligence-based business training games, which counts Cisco, Duke University, and Arizona States among its clients. He's also a fellow at Ball State University as an adjunct professor of marketing at the Florida Atlantic University and a visiting lecturer at the Columbia University and the Harvard School of Design. So that sounds amazing, Kevin. Is there anything we're leaving out that we should know about you?
No, I think it's plenty. Although I have to say, I don't know if you or your listeners have the same feeling as my internal age is 13. So when I hear all these accolades, I go, who's that?
So Kevin, nowadays with all these things that you've been doing that have been going, at least they seem to be going fantastically well. Can you tell us what a day in the life of Kevin looks like, or what does it look like to be Kevin Allen these days?
Oh my gosh, well, I think the way I would answer that is, whenever I look back at the things that I was involved in, like Priceless, whatever thing, it all looks like the seamless logic of a bunch of geniuses, all done perfectly in order. And the fact is, it's chaos. It's the best description I can give you. And in some ways, creating and building something, if you're feeling that it's chaotic, that's okay. And so, as a day can go from starting in the morning talking to our colleague who handles all of the technology side of our business, who's actually based in London. The day ends with a dialogue with the people who help develop our characters, who are in Australia, literally from one end of the day to the other, pitching a prospect, doing a demo, working on our latest game, which is due out literally at any minute. But I would say, placing a priority on our customers and our end users. At the end of the day, it's so important that you almost have a sign on the wall that says, don't forget, it's about them.
That's super important. We always have to remember what are the objectives that we do and the people we're designing for. So I can't agree more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kevin, we've heard of many of the, as you were mentioning, the accolades and the good things that have happened, but in this industry, as in I think any other industry, we also have those moments which are the moments when things don't go perfect, which are those when what we would maybe call a favorite fail or a first attempt in learning. Can you tell us a story of one of those key learnings for you, and especially in the area of games and games for learning and all these things that you've been doing lately? Can you take us to the ground level? We want to live that moment with you.
Sure. I think that one of the things I encourage, and it's funny because my partner, Carl's, also my life partner, but also a key partner in the business, and is himself an artist and creator, is getting feedback. And I can be almost a little bit like a diva. I don't want to hear the feedback. I don't want to hear the bad news. Carl's like, no, we got to hear it and we love it. And so, we build in lots and lots of stages whereby we expose what we're doing in real time to the people who not only will buy it, but the people who will use it. And I remember early on, we had developed a method of our characters, which we're using inanimate objects, like an old telephone, but with a voice and eyes. And it was the coolest thing. Everybody loved it. It was so cool. It was so funny. But when we started testing it, people didn't like it. And it was so interesting to see what happened. Half of our team was like, they don't know what they're talking about. We're creative. We're the game people. We know what we're doing. And then there was still some of us who go, you know what? We better listen here because there's something in this. And the biggest lesson that we took away from that is never to forget, no matter how much technology we use, no matter how sophisticated we make this is a human game. In other words, it was clear that while these were clever, they were not connecting with people on an emotional level. And so we evolved from that. We threw it all out, literally threw it all out, and restarted again. And of course, now have the characters that we have now. Even CGI, we tried all kinds of stuff. And ultimately, you know that famous election where they had on the wall, "It's the economy, stupid." I think it was James Carville was in the Clinton election. And we almost have a sign on our wall, theoretically or emotionally, that says, remember, it's about them and it's emotional.
That was not connecting in the way that you were expecting from the start.
Quite the contrary. People found it funny, but it wasn't. So we can get really and funny in many ways. I've brought over a lot of my lessons from the ad business, because a lot of this when we're creating like this, a lot of this happens. When we get all excited about some execution, when it may be something that confuses or people don't understand or don't get.
Absolutely. So the clarification, the whole understanding, again, we sometimes mention this as play testing and checking with our actual users and see what they're after, what they're looking for, what they find when they actually confront the product. It's not always what we expect.
Yeah, and I admit though at the same time that listening is to that process is very tricky, because you want to. We just, for example, did some focus groups with students on another one of our products, and you got to listen carefully, because you don't want people telling. Let's put it this way: you don't want to put the game design in the hands of a room full of college students necessarily. So you've got to listen very selectively to what you're hearing. But I think, to your point, it's also having the confidence to basically hear bad news and hear someone say, this is not great, or it's not good enough, or I don't get it.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And Amy Jo Kim always says it's not only listening to other people, it's who to listen to, who to ignore. What are the things that you actually have to be after? And I think I'm a firm believer in that as well. I completely agree with you, Kevin. So taking a spin on this story and maybe going for another story, what would you say is a big challenge that you faced and solved using these games, this game thinking, these ideas? What would be a challenge that you faced and, of course, successfully went through it? And tell us that story. How did you get to that?
I think that I would answer it in two phases. I think the first phase was the creation of our original suite, which I think we're up to 6 or 7 games, all involved in things like leadership and business ethics and entrepreneurship and that. I think that the big challenge from my perspective was, how do you ensure that the game experience is grounded in what they care about? Because once you start executing, it's sort of like it could be a runaway train. Thinking can really get away with itself. I would say, so that's the first piece, and constantly asking ourselves, when we look at every aspect of what we've created, is this helping our player? Is this adding value to what it is we want them to take away, or are we just excited about a little piece of execution we happen to love? I would say the other big challenge is, and we're embarking on this now with our student success game, which is how there are games you can use to inform, but we believe very strongly that this incredible tool and practice can be used to solve really significant problems. And so ultimately, it's actually rethinking what this is about. In other words, if students are dropping out, how could we use a game-based learning a tool to help ameliorate that process? And it's something we've actually done in collaboration with Ball State, and we're very, very excited about it. So the challenge, I guess, in answer to your question, there's the challenge that you face whilst creating the game itself. But I would offer that I think there are a large number of very serious business issues, cultural issues, behavioral issues that have the capacity to be solved through this extraordinary means of learning.
That sounds absolutely great. I mean, you're working in Ball State by any chance? Have you worked with Scott Renke?
I don't know the name. The wonderful fellow who we've been working with, a fellow named Dr. Dennis Trinkle and his team. The game is designed for colleges and universities to deal with the process, the sad difficulty of freshman dropout. It's a chronic, serious problem, especially among first-generation students, and I understand that. I'm a first-generation student myself, and we're super excited about this and the prospects of using this. I mean, just think about it. It's one thing to teach people how to lead, and that's all, God goodness sake, it's our bread and butter, and we're proud of it. But imagine if someone uses this game and doesn't drop out as a result of having played the game. I mean, think of that. Achieving
like real life, amazing, incredible results through a game.
Yep. So that's what we're doing, and I think there's many frontiers that have yet to be addressed, and that I think we will see more and more how these glorious method of game-based learning can be employed.
Yeah. Definitely. I truly believe, I think it's been Andrzej Marchewski who's been talking about what he calls game-based solutions. So not only learning, but solutions for clients. And there's many things. I think that the term adapts very well to what we're talking about today.
Yep, I completely agree with that.
So Kevin, when you're creating these amazing games for universities and game-based learning or for other types of clients, would you say that there is a series of steps, a process that you follow when you do these, and if so, can you give us an overview of what that process looks like?
You're gonna think this is really crazy, but I don't think that I could top a gamification methodology or the kind of things that Dr. Sutton would talk about on how one goes about. I mean, goodness sake, I mean, it would make my brain fry. But I'll tell you, my answer to the question will come from one of my great mentors in the advertising business. And I would go bursting into his office going, Hank, I got a really great idea. I'm going to do this. And he goes, hang on a second. 3 questions. And I go, oh, God, here he goes. Who are you talking to? What are you going to say to them? And how are you going to say it? And you're walking in here with the how. Do you know who the who is? And I went, no. He went, okay, go back and figure it out. In other words, we must remember, and he used to catch me out all the time, because we get excited about execution. Execution is fun, it's cool, it's marvelous, it's wonderful. But it has to be in sequence. So the first step is to understand deeply, who is it that we are creating this for? What is not only their functional requirement, but what is the emotional motivation, or the emotional state of the person that we are going to be exposing this to? What is it that we are going to impart and say and deliver to these folks? And I can say, whenever I've ended up in a place that was wrong or I had to rethink, it's inevitably because I didn't answer the question of the who and what effectively. So that would be, and I would place an emphasis on the who. I borrowed a term that we developed when I was in the ed business called the conceptual target, which is defining your target not simply in functional terms, but in emotional terms. And so when we were developing this student success game, we were asking ourselves, what is the emotional state of a student who's never had anybody in the family go to college before? So that's
absolutely the first question. You were mentioning the who. the what, so the next step would be, what do you want to achieve? Am I getting it right?
Well, it's really what is it that you, so the who is who you're talking to. What is the content? What are you saying? What are you imparting? What are you delivering? What is the experience that is good, that will be shaped by who it is that you're speaking to? Definitely.
And especially in games, you have to know what are they motivated by, right?
Exactly right. And then and only then can you then sit down and figure out the how and where these things go wrong. I mean, I've seen a zillion, advertising ideas, but when you realize the reason they were wrong is because they had no concept of who it is that they were. It was sort of an execution in search of an audience.
Yeah, it's like a solution in the search of a problem.
Correct.
It goes definitely the other way around.
Yep.
Just a quick break before we continue. Are you enjoying this podcast? If you're listening through a podcasting app, please subscribe and rate us on the app. This will be of great help to reach more engagers so we can change the world together through gamification. So Kevin, what would you say in your experience and what you've been doing in this time, what would you say could be like sort of a best practice or something that you would always think that using it or thinking about these things would be a best practice or something that would benefit almost any game-based learning project or any game-based solution project?
Well, I guess you probably can see that there's a theme, and a theme that's driven my 30-year ad career and is now driving our gamification experience, and that would be the emotional motivation, and I also think that the probably the other thing that a project could benefit from beyond what we've just talked about, which is before I take one step, I'm going to understand deeply the emotional motivation of the people that are going to play, and the second would be is never to forget that at the end of the day, we are employing the oldest form of human communication, that is storytelling. And it's easy for us to get caught up in the fact that we are employing some of the most exciting technologies. We're digital, or this and that and the other thing. But, when Ugg walked into the cave and drew on the cave wall, he was telling a story, and that story is emotive. It has a hero, it has a villain, it has foils, it has Yoda, and those things are powerful, and it's the oldest and most effective form of human communication. So using a story-based view of things is wildly beneficial.
Absolutely. So I'm picking up the whole storytelling or narrative element of games and gamification. And the other one is, of course, as you were mentioning from the start, is the emotional aspect, like thinking emotionally, where do you want people at or where they are at currently?
Yep.
So Kevin, what would you say, again, from the world of entertainment or the ones that you've created or something that you've observed, what would you say is your favorite game?
Well, I mean, I guess I have to be rather parochial. I think our students... I think our student success game is a high watermark. I'm really, really proud of it.
Fantastic. Is there somewhere that our listeners can get a glimpse at what that looks like?
Yep. Just check out our site, www.eigames.com, and they'll begin to get a description of what we've created, and they'll inherently see the benefit to these young people. It's super exciting.
Nice. It sounds very exciting. Being excited. I mean, I understand some people might see that as self-talk and self-selling your thing, but I can also see the way that it is about being excited about what you're doing and being proud of the solution that you've created. So I completely vouch for that as well.
Well, I think it comes under the heading that one of the things I realized in the ed business, and I realized the same in the game-based learning or game-based solutions industry, and I share this with your listeners, is this is a business of impact. This is a business where what you create can have an incredible impact on the people that are engaging. Just think of that. So if a young person who maybe has struggling with their first year at college finds a way to get comfortable and doesn't drop out, just think of that. It's what gets me out of bed in the morning.
The impact of what we're creating is
Yes.
that higher purpose and meaning as well, taken from the strategies of games, but it's taken from the strategies of games because it's a psychological drive that we all have.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So after listening to some of these questions and part of the interview and the whole vibe of Professor Game, is there somebody that comes to your mind that you would like to listen to in an interview like this one?
Oh, the person came right to my head. Although she's terribly camera shy, Lord knows if you can ever get her on the there's two actually. One is Andy Hess, who was at Arizona State. This is a pioneer. This is a lady who saw the early scratching of what we were doing and said, I love this, and we got to do this. And goodness knows we've got how many games and how many students now playing at Arizona State. So she's amazing. I don't know whether you've ever interviewed Brian Burke, who wrote the book Gamify. He's at Gartner. Oh, my goodness. He is brilliant. And he was one of the first people we talked to. And the reason I mention him is I found out about him because his book was published by the same publishing house that my books were. And so when we first started out, I called him and told him what we were doing. And he said, you're going to do great. I said, really, Brian, why do you say that? He said, because you're building this for them. I never forgot it. He said, if your player smells that you've created something that's designed to modify their behavior, they'll smell it within 30 seconds, and they may click through it, but forget about engaging them. So he's a really super guy, and it's a terrific book, by the way. And
in that same sense of books, because you've mentioned Brian Burke's book, is there any, if there any, and which book would you recommend to the engagers and why?
Well, this follows a pattern. It's funny because all through my career, I used to tell my folks, there are 5,000 zillion books on what we do for a living. What I want you to read is something outside of our industry to help give you perspective. And one of my absolute favorite books is Letters to My Daughter by Maya Angelou. And when you read that book, what you're reading is the story of a woman who is emotionally intelligent, is the story of a woman who will never stop, no matter how much setback. And you're reading the story of a woman who was, sadly, the embodiment of generosity of spirit. And, those are vital qualities, not only to build into the games that we create, but to build into the cultures of the organizations that create these games.
That makes a lot of sense and sounds like a great recommendation. I haven't read that book. I'll try to add it to my list.
It's sweet. It's lovely.
So Kevin, what would you say is your superpower in gamification, game-based learning, and all of these strategies that we take from games? What's your sweet spot?
I love this term. Whenever I hear this term, I think, out of a nearby phone booth, it's sort of like, I would say it's empathy. What I call having a good smeller. It's the ability to, as we were talking about earlier, imagine you're listening to a group of people talk about maybe an early concept that you created, and your empathy and your emotional antenna is able to pick up going, that's what motivates these people. And so that's what I think it is.
That makes a lot of sense because empathy is something that you definitely need if you're going to think of the people you're designing for. So
yep, absolutely.
Absolute superpower. So Kevin, we're arriving to the end of the interview. However, we do have this sort of gamified-ish question because there's some social connectedness because it comes from our audience. There is random elements or a lot of curiosity comes up.
Right.
And the question this time that comes up is, where do you think is the future for gamification?
That's a really interesting one. And, what I would say, by definition, it seems that one of the underpinnings of a game-based learning experience is the ability to suspend reality and place our player in the role of someone, whether in our case it's placing them in the role of being a chief executive or an entrepreneur or the head of a university. all these fundamental experiences. So certainly, I think we can look forward to technologies that are going to help enhance and make more exciting that immersion. But I would say, so that is that, and it's good. Lord knows. I mean, we think of virtual reality and these various things, and it's incredible to me that the technology that we're excited about. We were excited about 6 months seems passé. I mean, the speed with which these techniques are being developed. But I will say a big however is whilst we embrace these, we can never forget that connecting with a player on an emotional level, understanding what motivates them, there are certain enduring techniques, certain enduring truths that will never change no matter how much technology we create. And so always keep that in the back of your mind as we are advancing into these new technological frontiers.
Absolutely. I'm completely convinced that we have to keep all of these things in mind. And as I think I've mentioned it many times, but I don't know if recently, gamification and game-based learning and game-based solutions, they can be using the latest and greatest of technology, and those are amazing solutions as well. But sometimes, and I think it was Kirsten Oberpreeler who recently mentioned it, sometimes it's about having a board at work and having a small leaderboard that you put there and you do it with pen and paper, and getting people to engage through that. And it can be for the simplest of things. In her case, as far as I can remember, it was about, having like a clean kitchen area for the office. That's a simple thing. You would think it's a simple solution, but you have to get people on board. You have to engage them with that solution. And sometimes, again, simple thing. You don't necessarily require a complete and complex theme narrative, Zelda world and so on. It can be as simple as that. It can be as simple as that. So both extremes are great.
I completely agree with you. And we used to say in the advertising business, which as I mentioned, there's so many parallels here in my life experience, is let's not let the execution overwhelm our strategy. And so I love that. I think you're spot on.
Fantastic. So Kevin, is there any final piece of advice you want to leave the engagers with before we finish off?
I think I've been so lucky in my life, whether it was the Priceless campaign or my work with the city of New York and now creating these games. There's a common denominator to these experiences, and that is follow your gut, follow your instinct. Whenever you're creating something new, you're going to hear the words of what is otherwise called conventional wisdom. No, you can't do that. No one's going to buy that. No one's going to blah, 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 blah. Don't listen to any of that. Follow your instinct. If you finally decide yourself to throw it out and start again, that's okay. But don't let anyone tell you that your thinking and your ideas are unworthy. The only person that can do that is you.
And I don't know if you've heard about this before, but I've heard that I'm trying to remember who it was that has mentioned many times that, that gut instinct and that gut feeling that we get, we've been developing that for millions of years. And it doesn't come, it's not for free. And it's not really just, a washy thing that just comes out and a fluffy idea that, the stars and the secrets. It's because I think it's accumulation of our experiences, our prior experiences, and the knowledge that we have, and it's expressed in that way. I don't know if you found that in your work as well.
I don't think there's any question. The price, for example, while it's not a game-based example, but I can tell you that the Priceless campaign was based on a gut. And we rejected the original strategy we were given because we felt, no, in our soul, it isn't right, and we've got a sense of how to connect with these people. And if we follow the rules, this campaign would never exist.
There you go. So going for that gut feeling, validating with your users, I think those are fundamental themes of this chat today. So Kevin, where can we find you in the world of the internet or otherwise? How can we make you any further questions if the engagers want to talk to you? Where we can find you and your work?
Please do. I'd love to hear from them. Our site is EI Games, www.eigames.com. And certainly you could write to me at kevin@eigames.com.
That sounds great. Thank you very much for your time today, Kevin. It's been an amazing chat. Engagers, now you know if you want to talk with Kevin, you want to do business, or you want to ask him any questions, you know where you can find him, even with his direct email address. Thanks again, Kevin. However, now it's time to say that it's game over.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Engagers, it's fantastic to have you here. I hope you enjoyed this interview with Kevin. Are you using Instagram? I'm getting the grip of it and would love to connect with you there. Just like on Twitter, my username is RobAlvarezB. And before you go on to your next mission, would you like to know how Dustin is using board games in education and his gamification kit? Then subscribe using your favorite podcast app and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.